Hello, welcome. This is Project Management Foundational Concepts. This is one that I hope you're going to do first. If you're doing multiple of these sessions, that you do this one first, because we're going to cover a lot of the basics of the profession of project management and some of the basic terms you've got to know. And if you're coming back to revisit it, feel free to skip through the bits that you don't want, that you already know, and just get to the bits you know. So welcome, my name is Sean Whitaker. Hopefully you know that already. You've logged on and figured out who I am. So my goal with this session, with these foundational concepts, is first, I want to convince you that there is a profession of project management and introduce you to some of the things about it that you need to know, and then build on that to give you an overview of some of the foundational concepts and words and phrases that you'll need to know that we take for granted in the profession of project management. So that's the goal. I'll check back in with you at the end of the session to make sure we've achieved that. I'm confident that we will. Now, unfortunately, the real world out there is, at this point in time, the profession of project management is one of the newest professions out there. And keep in mind that I think for most countries, the legal definition of a profession is that it must have legislation that defines it. So you see legislation that defines the medical profession, the legal profession, engineering profession, accounting profession. Project management doesn't have that yet. Hopefully it will soon. But it is a profession in all other senses of the word. But it is still new as a codified profession. Obviously, project management has been around for thousands of years, managing projects, delivering things. But as a profession, it's still relatively new, 50, 60 years old. So it's still maturing. And as a result of this, a lot of people don't know that there is actually a formally defined growing and maturing profession. As a result, it may be that even today, most project managers that you meet are what we call accidental project managers. These are people who perhaps didn't intend to become a project manager, but somehow became project managers. Look, and I count myself as one of those people as well. I started my career a long time ago, actually as a town planner or urban planner, depending on where you're from. And I had a number of clients who were doing property redevelopment. And I saw what they were doing and thought, well, I can do that too. So I became, I guess, what you'd call a property developer or a project manager. And then it wasn't till I think 4 or 5 years later that I actually got given the title project manager for one of the jobs that I was working in. But again, I'm an accidental project manager, and a lot of people that you meet, maybe of my age, will be accidental. I certainly know there's a growing call and a growing change of people actually deliberately choosing to enter the project management profession and grabbing those credentials and doing those courses needed to actually enter it as a deliberate career choice. So let's start at the beginning and help you make sense of some of the profession anyway. So what this diagram shows is that at the top we've got international standards. And I'll switch on my laser pointer here. So we've got international standards here at the top. Below those international standards, we do have frameworks. And below those, we have specific methodologies. So starting at the top, there are some ISO standards on project management. So the first one is ISO 21502, which is an international standard on project management. It's still relatively new itself. It's been out since about 2000 and I want to say 2010, somewhere around there. So it's still relatively new. There's also guidance on program management, guidance on project management, and there's some other standards within this ISO 21500 family. So this is sort of the top level, the international standards here. Below those international standards, we have a variety of different, what I call framework documents. And these generally are our box, our bodies of knowledge. And the most popular one and the most well-known one is the PMBOK guide from the Project Management Institute. And we cover that in a little more detail shortly. And there's also the Association of Project Management and its body of knowledge as well. And we'll talk about the PMBOK guide shortly, and you'll get an idea of what a BOK is and what it isn't. Both of these organizations donated large portions of their BOKs, their bodies of knowledge, at the time of the development of the ISO standard for the development of the ISO standard. So there's a lot of similarities between the ISO standard and the box from the different professional bodies. Obviously, the ISO standard is supposed to eventually become the unifying standard. There'll always be frameworks which reflect the different professional associations. And then right at the bottom, we have individual methodologies which are built out of these frameworks, and those in turn align with the international standards. So obviously the list of methodologies is exhaustive. So some of the more well-known ones that you may have heard of would be Method 1, 2, 3, 10-step, Scrum, Prism, Prince2, etc., etc., etc. These are particular approaches, particular ways of doing projects, and they've generally been developed to suit particular types of projects in terms of complexity and duration. So that's just a general guide there for an introduction to what you need to know about the profession of project management with international standards, frameworks, and methodologies. Now, I'm going to introduce you to the Project Management Institute. That's the professional body that I've been affiliated with for, well, over 20 years now. Before I do that, though, just a disclaimer, I'm relatively agnostic when it comes to professional associations. I do recommend very strongly that you join one and become affiliated with it. The Project Management Institute, or PMI, is my choice. We'll talk about that why. It's certainly the largest in the world, but just I want to acknowledge that you've got the International Project Management Association, that's sort of loosely European based, but spreading throughout the globe too. You've got the Association of Project Management, which is largely UK based as well. And there are some smaller ones throughout the world too, either generally to do with project management generally, or they may be smaller organizations associated with things like project controls. So the Project Management Institute, PMI, has been around, I think it's, I'm not sure I've got this right, I think it's actually 1969, because I was at the 50th celebrations in Philadelphia in 2019. And I got one of the books, which is a magnificent book, on 50 years of PMI. So I think it's 1979, or 1969, sorry. It's the most global of all the professional organizations, and it's got chapters in most countries in the world. And with those, it's got well over 1.5 million current members and credential holders combined, and that number is growing really fast. PMI obviously has responsibility for developing a lot of standards for project management, including the well-known PMBOK guide and a lot of other standards. It sponsors continuing academic research and regional and global conferences. I try and get along to the global conference, which is often held in North America in the last quarter of the year. And I've been a speaker at some of those. They're really great events to get to. PMI also has a suite of globally recognized credentials, and I'll show you some of those on the next slide. So please go along and visit pmi.org, check them out in terms of membership, what membership offers, all the documents and standards, because there are a lot of them, and I'm not going to touch on them all, and also all of the credentials. The last word I'll say on this is I've been a member of the Project Management Institute since 2004. It's been absolutely fantastic for my career in terms of, well, A, the professional development, helping me be a better project manager, project management consultant, project management teacher. The amount of friends I've met has been absolutely amazing. Networking for professional development as well. And obviously I've been volunteering as well since 2005, so it's been a long time. And it gives me the opportunity to give back to the profession. And I volunteered at branch level, chapter level, and global level as well. So that's what I'll leave you with on the PMI. But just a little bit of a deeper dive here into the PMBOK guide itself. Now, PMBOK stands for the Project Management Body of Knowledge. It's changed a bit over the years. So we're dealing with version 7 at the moment, which is a huge change from the previous 6 versions. It's a massive change, version 7, and to a lot of practitioners who are used to dealing with the 6th, 5th, 4th, 3rd editions, it was a big change. It's moved to a principles-based approach. And so what we used to refer to as the PMBOK guide, the contents of that, the process groups, the knowledge areas, are now contained in another book called Process Groups, a Practice Guide. You can see both books covers there on the screen. So the PMBOK guide and also Process Groups, a Practice Guide, both of these books, what they are is, well, first of all, what they're not. They're not a methodology. They never will be a particular way to do a project. And I guess I get a little bit annoyed sometimes when I hear somebody say, oh, we follow the PMBOK guide methodology. Honestly, I want to shake them and go, you can't do that. You literally can't. It's not a methodology. It's not a way to do projects. And the way that I like to explain it is to imagine if a group of professionals decided to go out there and figure out what is done in the profession of project management and try and put that all into one book. But you get lots of different things done, and that's fine and to be expected. And so what they decide to do is say, well, look, this is all a thought exercise. It's not actually how it's developed, but it will give you an indication. Maybe they've got two different ways to do things, or two different ways to call things, or more than two different ways. So they make a decision that whenever over 50% of the project management professionals use it, that's what will be included in the book. The other won't be included in the book, but it will be recognized as a perfectly acceptable, professional and proper way to do projects. So that's what the PMBOK guide is. It's simply a collection of best practice, what most people do most of the time. And it does make it clear that it's not the only way to do projects. And it's already, both of those books combined are really thick. If it was to try and capture everything that was done in the professional project management, it'd be this thick and unusable. So the PMBOK guide in all of its previous iterations has made it clear that it is not an exhaustive nor prescriptive way to do projects. It's simply an attempt in one document to gather what is considered best practice most of the time, while acknowledging other things. Also, when it comes to terminology, it chooses a standardized terminology. So for example, the document that starts a project, it chooses to use the word project charter, because at the time of writing, that was the most commonly used word. But it recognizes you can call it project mandate, project initiation document, business case, work order, whatever you want. But for the purposes of standardized terminology, it says project charter. So that's what the PMBOK guide and Process Groups of Practice guide are. They're not a prescriptive way to do projects. They are an invitation to read through them and go, that's useful, that's not, that one is, and we'll use it in this particular way. And that's what you're supposed to do with it. Okay, so that's the PMBOK guide. Obviously, if you become a member of PMI, they're free to download, as are a lot of their other books. But start there. So hopefully we've got that clear about what they are and what they aren't. Quickly just going through this list. Look, by the time you read this list, it'll be out of date. The list of PMI credentials is always growing. And so this is current, the time of writing, I guess, is my disclaimer here. At the top, you've got the Project Management Professional Credential, the PMP, which I guess is quickly becoming sort of the global default, not quite entry level, but certainly, it says that you've got a minimum of 3 years experience if you've got a university degree, or 5 years experience, 60 months. If you don't have a university degree, these are prerequisites. It says that you've sat an exam, which in order to pass the exam, you've studied for it and you have an awareness of a very broad range of project management knowledge. So for me, the PMP is a great, it's beyond entry level because of the work requirements, leading and directing project tasks. So for me, it just says that you've done some great work, you've got some experience under your belt, and hopefully you understand the entire profession of project management, and therefore throughout your career, you can pick and choose the things that are relevant for you. There's a lot of other credentials there, from the Certified Associate in Project Management. We used to call it CAPM, not allowed to call it CAPM anymore. No, PMI wants us to call it Certified Associate in Project Management. CAPM sounds much better. Obviously, credentials there, you've got Agile credentials, business analysis credentials, risk scheduling, a new construction professional credential, which has only been out for a short time at the time of recording this session. And you can go check out that hyperlink there pmi.org/certification.aspx if you want to have a look at all of the certifications. I'm a big fan of the PMI certifications. They're always being updated. They're always being checked against industry standards, industry needs. They're always being compared to role descriptions. And a lot of them comply with ISO 17024, which is an ISO standard dealing with item writing or question writing. So that's what I like about them. So yeah, do go and check them out. So there's my first challenge for you, is go and visit pmi.org, check out membership, check out credentials, check out all the documents that are there, consider joining your local chapter, consider volunteering, make sure you definitely do that, consider volunteering, and let me know, will you? Drop me an email if you decide to join, or if you are already a member, drop me an email, and look forward to catching up with you either online or in person at one of PMI's events. So let's start with, again, the foundational concepts. What exactly is this thing called project management? What is it? You hear it all the time, project management. Well, here's a very formal definition here, taken from, I'm just going to turn my drawing pen on, we'll do the vanishing pen, gives me a sense of control here. We'll pick a nice color. Green stands out. There we are. Okay, so project management. So it's all about being proactive for a start, choosing the appropriate knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques. Now, I'm going to say this a lot. If you watch these modules, I'm going to repeat this. The tools and techniques that you choose to complete your projects should totally reflect the complexity, the duration, the size, the maturity of your projects and your organizations. It's about being appropriate. It is possible, totally possible, to kill a project by having too many processes, tools, and techniques, or just many that you don't know how to use. Most of the time we undercook a project though and don't do enough. So it's about the appropriate knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to successfully manage. And here is the definition of a project: a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result subject to progressive elaboration. There's a lot in there for a start. So the first one is temporary. A project has a beginning and it has an end. And there's only really two types of work in the world: projectized work or operational work. Operational work is repetitive and ongoing, never has an end. Manufacturing cans or something, a factory that just does the same thing. That's operational work. A project has an end at some point. It's going to deliver something, and that's why it's temporary. It's not permanent and ongoing. I've often said the big difference between a project manager and a general manager is that a general manager, managing an operational company, wants their business to keep going forever, whereas a project manager knows their business is going out of business and prepares for it. But pretty much the skill sets between a general manager and a project manager are the same. We'll talk about that more shortly. So it's a temporary endeavor, something you're going to try and create something unique, a product, service, or result, something that generally hasn't been done exactly like this before. Now, it may be totally unique, never been done like this before, or something that you've done sort of before, but it's a different client or a different location or something. Now, here's the last one: subject to progressive elaboration. It's about time we busted this myth that at the beginning of projects, you know everything there is to know about projects. Not possible, never will be possible. Don't let anybody convince you otherwise. This term of progressive elaboration, and we'll see another term shortly called rolling wave planning. Progressive elaboration is just that acknowledgement that as we go through a project, we learn more about it. And as we learn more about it, we can do different layers and levels of planning. So at the beginning of the project, our time and cost estimates may have a wide range of uncertainty in them because we just don't know what's going to happen, and we make our best guess. But as we go through, we progressively elaborate and learn more about the project, and we can start to refine things. And as I said, we'll talk about rolling wave planning shortly. And typically when it comes to a project, there are some somewhat unique constraints. operational activities do have some of these constraints as well. But generally, we can be asked to trade off or acknowledge constraints of scope, quality, time or schedule, money or budget, resources, expectations, risk. Just be aware, though, that not every project has the same constraints. I had a student tell me that all projects have money constraints. And I pointed out a client I'd worked with a few years ago. Money wasn't an issue and they didn't want to know about money. So no, that not all projects do. In fact, a project I managed very recently, money wasn't even considered. It was 2.5 years. Money wasn't even part of it. We never reported on what was spent, and we were using external consultants. Same with time. Not every project has time constraints. Some people want it done properly rather than on time. But generally, most projects, budget, time, quality, scope, all of those things are our normal constraints. The major characteristics of a project: has an established benefit or outcome and a deliverable and output. Now, pay attention here. This is really important because a lot of project managers forget the first part of that sentence. They forget the first part of that sentence about the benefit or the outcome. All projects produce a deliverable or an output. They build something, whether it's software or construction or research and development or whatever it is. They build something, they deliver something. That's the deliverable or the output. And a lot of people get too focused on this and say that's the measure of success for a project. Look, that's one of the measures of success for a project. The actual reason for the project was the outcome that you wanted and the benefit that that outcome was supposed to produce. You know, all of those things that you wrote in the business case or the initiation document or the work order that justified the decision to do this project. Generally, I find, though, that people get too fixated on the deliverable, and when it appears, they pat themselves on the back. That's project success. And we do have a module, so do hunt it out, on benefits management, which is that initial forecasting and estimating of the benefits, the tracking of them, and then the benefits realization, where once the deliverable has appeared, you check, well, we know the deliverables there. We can see it, we can kick it, we can smell it, we can taste it, we can use a keyboard on it. But did it deliver the benefits that we want? And in that module, we'll talk about some of the difficulties of it, which is often the time frame for benefits, that if they're not delivered when the deliverable appears, there can often be a lag of weeks, months, or even years. And that's one of the problems. But anyway, so that's what a project has, deliverables and benefits. We talked about a defined lifespan. That's that temporary endeavor, beginning, middle, and an end. Often, and the standard way to do projects is in a matrix organization where you have to go across the organization, you get the different skills. We don't see too many projectized organizations or just project teams that work consistently on projects. And generally, because it is something unique, generally doing something never done before. And as I've already said in the previous slide, often it has specific time, cost, and performance requirements involved in it as well. This is just a general diagram to explain the project stages or processes. This is taken from the PMBOK guide. It's a common diagram in the PMBOK guide, but it's used in other textbooks as well. These are not phases of a project. Some people sort of see, well, we've got an initiation phase, a planning phase, an executing phase, and monitor, but that's not what they are. So they're not phases of a project. It's simply a nice graphical way to indicate the sort of work you might be doing over time in a project and the level of effort. So that's effort and that's time that way. So you generally do this initiation work generally at the beginning. This is where you consider whether you should do it, weigh up the pros and cons, figure out who's available, do your best statements of work, all your estimates here at the beginning. At the same time, shortly after that, very shortly after it, you'll begin your planning processes. Now you'll see the planning processes go all the way nearly to the end because you're constantly replanning. That's that sense of progressive elaboration, rolling wave planning. You just don't go initiate, plan, execute. Please don't fall into that trick or trap, sorry. So planning is what you're doing throughout the project, and that takes a lot more effort. There's that effort there. Obviously, as soon as you've done enough planning, you start doing the executing part of it here. So again, it's not plan, then execute like that. They're not stages, they're not phases. So once you've done enough planning to start executing, you can, and that rises to become the bulk of the work. Okay, and you're executing nearly to the end there. Now, the last two here, monitoring and closing are really interesting. Monitoring and closing actually starts pretty much at the beginning, and you monitor, or monitoring controlling, sorry, and you go all the way nearly to the end. You're checking what you're doing and what was planned, and you're making sure that everything's on track throughout the whole life of the project. So that's that line there. Now, finally, closing. A lot of people seem to think that closing would normally be a sort of strange blip at the end like that, but it's not. You actually plan for closure and prepare for closure all the way back here. You certainly agree on your project closure checklists right back here with your initial planning, how much it's going to cost, who's going to do it. You include it in the scope of work. It makes its way into the WBS, things like that. And then you'll be checking and gathering evidence. You'll be doing lessons learned. You'll be doing, if you're doing an agile or adaptive type of project, you might be doing retrospectives, and they all become part of your closing processes. You might also be closing contracts throughout the life of the project. But then obviously there's a little wee surge at the end with closing activities. So that, remember, these aren't stage gates or phases. This is just a nice graphical description of how projects, stages, I guess, or process groups, we call them. They're all built on a wonderful diagram. This was called the Schuett and Deming, after Mr. Schuett and Mr. Deming. I can't remember who Mr. Schuett was, but Deming is W.E. Deming, sort of the grandfather or father of modern quality management. And Schuett and Deming put together this thing called the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle. Project managers went, oh, that's nice. That sort of describes what we do. And they've just added in project initiation, choosing which projects to do and starting them, and project closure to it. So it's still based on the old Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle here. And basically what this means, and in a way, it kind of sums up the profession of project management. We plan what we're going to do. We make plans, okay? Then we do what we plan to do. And we check that what we're doing and what we plan to do are equal. They should be equal at any point. So we're always checking. If we find that what we're doing and what we plan to do are not equal, we act. We change one of them. Now, we can change either of them, by the way. Some people think that if you find out you're not doing what you plan to do, you've got to change what you're doing to match the plan. Not the case. Totally up to you what you change. But a general rule of project management is what you plan to do and what you are doing must be equal at any point. So if you find through the checking process that they're not, change one of them. You either change your plans to match what you're doing, because that's what you want to be doing, or change what you're doing to go back to what you'd planned to do. Okay, so we do that as a constant cycle going round and round and round and round and round throughout the whole project. It's not something we do once. It doesn't sum up the whole project. We're doing it daily, weekly, monthly, plan, do, check, act. Okay. And then obviously we close the project as we spoke about before. So that's the plan, do, check, act cycle, which I like because it sort of sums up project management. I mentioned progressive elaboration early on, and a subset of that is rolling wave planning. And this just recognizes that throughout a project, we don't know everything at any point in the project, and the level of detail in our planning will depend on how much we do know about it. So for example, we may be working on a 2-year project. Now, we wouldn't put exhaustive, low-level, really detailed plans in place for a 2-year project. That would be foolish and a waste of time because things are going to change. But what we do is what we call rolling wave planning. We'll choose a time period, 1 month, 2 months, or 3 months. We'll plan in detail that period. The 3 to 6 month period we'll plan in a little less detail. The 6 to 12 month period, a little less detail. And the 12 month to 24 month period, probably really high level planning. But then as we move through the project, as we roll through it, that 3 month window of detailed planning moves with us. So we're always planning in detail the next 3 months, et cetera, et cetera. So that's rolling wave planning. So keep that in mind with progressive elaboration. Project management isn't about knowing everything all up front and doing a plan and over a year or two, everything works out according to that plan. It's not. It's a lot more mysterious than that. So do keep that in mind. And if anybody tells you it's different, you can tell them they're wrong. Look, let's have a quick chat about waterfall and agile. That's often how it's been framed, waterfall versus agile. You may have heard of it. Look, waterfall is very simplistic description that's been used incorrectly for a long time. I think the better terms, rather than waterfall and agile, is probably predictive and adaptive, or predictive and iterative. Um, but a lot of people, particularly on LinkedIn, where they like to argue about it, go waterfall and agile. Anyway, so basically what it says is we've got a spectrum of certainty in a project. Some projects, say like house building projects, are more predictive in nature. We can buy the site, design the plans, build as per the plans, a nice sequence of things, and it flows in steps like a waterfall. That's why it's called waterfall, or better, I think, calling it predictive. And that's a lot of projects lend themselves to that, particularly construction projects. But there are certainly some software projects that are simple and straightforward, not very complex, which absolutely suit this approach. Okay, so that's what waterfall is. I prefer the term predictive rather than waterfall, and I do not get into arguments on LinkedIn about waterfall or agile. And if you do see somebody on LinkedIn doing that, feel free to chime in and say that they're presenting a false argument. Because the other thing we need to look at is, in fact, agile or adaptive or iterative approaches. So the other end of the spectrum is an approach called agile or adaptive or iterative. And I guess for me, adaptive or iterative is a better term, because agile's, as we'll see soon, less of a methodology, more of a mindset and approach. And this is for projects where the iteration is really short term, like weeks. Notice what I said there. The iteration for adaptive projects is small, because I should have mentioned on the previous slide that waterfall or predictive projects have iterations as well, but they tend to be months or years long. And that's one of the big differences between predictive and adaptive projects. It's just they've both got iterations of how fast you do things, plan, do, check, act. But adaptive and iterative iterations tend to be 2, 3, or 4 weeks long rather than months or years long. And they basically come down to how fast that plan, do, check, act cycle goes. So projects that benefit from this approach would be software projects where you've never done the software code before, or the requirements are particularly complex. They do benefit from breaking things down into sprints or iterations and delivering value quickly as well. So you can visit these two sites that you see down the bottom, the agilemanifesto.org and agilealliance.org, both wonderful sites, free sites. Well, you can join Agile Alliance as well, but it's a great free site. And these are the two sites I recommend. Let's take a quick look at the Agile Manifesto, just to get an understanding of what Agile is and what it actually isn't. So when it comes to understanding Agile, it's important to know the background to Agile. So throughout most of human history, most projects that we've done have been construction projects, whether it was large-scale monument building, house building, or even moving into space and defense. We built stuff. And this suited more of a predictive approach. Decided what you want, made the plans for it, built things as per the plans, minor changes, and then lived in it, rode it, whatever it was. That was predictive. And with the rise in computing in the 70s and 80s and the rise of software coding to serve the needs of the computer, people began to use that particular approach, which was decide what you wanted the software to do, design the software, test the software, use the software. Obviously, there's a lot about software that is unknown and constantly changing. And people began in the 90s to realize that this approach didn't suit the growing complexity of software development. And you saw this particularly, with the rise of the home computer and then the rise of the internet. And software got a lot more complex. So there was a movement in the 90s to start a different approach to product delivery, which has become project management by default. But Agile is really a way to deliver products faster rather than the big scale of predictive approaches. So at a conference in the early 2000s, I think it was 2000, 2001, a bunch of engineers got together and the term Agile was coined. I think they wanted another name. I think they wanted to call it like lightweight or light project management or something like that, light development. But Agile was chosen. and the Agile Manifesto was launched there. And everything we see now is built on those original movements, all these methodologies that we see, whether it's Scrum or SAFe or DevOps or Disciplined Agile or Kanban, are all particular ways to apply these four foundational elements and the 12 principles of Agile. So I think Agile, big A, is not actually methodology. It's actually a mindset and an approach, and it informs some of the specific methodologies that are out there. So these are the four foundational elements from the agilemanifesto.org, and they simply say we are uncovering better ways of developing software, software there, by doing it and helping others do it. Through this work, we've come to value. Now, watch this. We're going to have a term on the left, then a term on the right. So processes and tools, individuals and interactions. Before we go through that though, the statement at the end of that is while there is value on the items on the right, this side, we value the items on the left more. So they do value these items on the right. They just value these things more. So let's go through them. So they value individuals and interactions over processes and tools. They do value processes and tools, but the teams that deliver the work should decide all of those. You shouldn't be constrained by the processes and tools. The individuals and interactions between them should be the predominant factor. I get this one because I get some people who go, oh, we're agile, so we don't do cost estimating or time estimating. We don't do scope definition. Like, no, you do. You should be using processes and tools as long as they suit the team that's doing it. They prefer working, or they value working software over comprehensive documentation. So it's not saying they don't value comprehensive documentation. It's just that they want working software first, okay, and documentation second. They value customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So you should have a contract, but don't let that be the way that you and the customer interact. The customer should be, on board with the project team. Project team should be able to talk with them all the time. It shouldn't be dictated to just by the contract terms. And you should have a plan of some sort, but you should recognize that you will be responding to change. So that's the top four elements of the Agile Manifesto. And the next slide actually takes us through the 12 elements. And it's important just to go through those. Oh, they're not, where are they? Oh, we'll come to, I must have hidden them. Okay, so there's my first mistake in the presentation. So go on to agilemanifesto.org and have a look at the next 12 principles of Agile. Go through those and you'll get an indication of how all the methodologies have actually been informed. Scrum, SAFe, which is scaled Agile, Disciplined Agile, all of the different ones all come from those principles. So keep that in mind. Agile itself is more of an attitude or approach rather than a particular methodology. And one of the things I often say, partly in jest, but partly true, is the heart of Agile is a empowered, high-performing team, choosing the best ways to continuously deliver value. That to me is the heart of Agile, and you put the right tools or methodologies around that team. But when it comes to what methodology you should have, should you do predictive? Should you do adaptive or agile? It's up to you. It really is up to you. You choose the methodology that suits you. You choose based on the size of your projects, the complexity of the projects, the duration of the projects, the maturity of your organization, the competency of your project managers. You are 100% free to mix and match any of the tools from predictive or from adaptive approaches to suit you. And you can even have a hybrid methodology which has elements of predictive at the beginning of it. During the product delivery, it swaps in and brings in some more adaptive approaches and then flicks back during project closure or anything to more predictive approaches. Totally up to you, okay? Don't let anybody tell you there's one way to do it, or that construction must use predictive, or that software must use adaptive or agile approaches, because you are free to choose anything that actually works for your projects. And that's one of the benefits of doing something like the PMP credential, is to pass that credential, you need to learn about most of predictive approaches and most of the adaptive approaches. So that's why it's such a good credential. that one is. So keep that in mind, but it's totally up to you. Some more definitions just really quickly. We've covered already what projects are. Remember that a temporary endeavour undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result subject to progressive elaboration. I'm teaching this far too long to be able to remember that. So some of the other words you're going to need to know is program. I don't care how you spell it, whether you spell it the American way, which is the shorter way. If in doubt, the American way is always the simpler way, or the British or UK way. Up to you how you spell it. A program is not just multiple projects. That's just a group of projects. A program is a group of projects that derive benefit from being managed in a coordinated way. So that means this program here that I've shown graphically, Project Alpha, Project Beta, and Project Delta all have something in common. And it could be that they're using the same resources, the same budget, sharing risks, they might be delivering smaller parts of a larger deliverable. And the role of the program manager there is to make sure that the conflict or interdependencies between the project is managed. So that's what a program is, and that's what a program manager does. Okay, so it's not just simply a group of projects. There has to be some reason that they derive benefit from being managed in a coordinated way. The other word you've got to know is the word portfolio. Portfolio just means all projects and programs that an organization or a business unit is doing. So if I go into an organization as a consultant and I want to see their portfolio, what I want to see is their entire list of projects under consideration and underway and possibly even closed for that entire organization or the particular business unit. So large organizations, different business units will have their portfolio of programs and projects. Smaller organizations will have a single portfolio of all their programs and projects. And remember, it's not just the ones that are underway, it's also the ones that could be underway that are going through project selection or program selection too. So that's what I want to see when I say, show me your list of projects in your portfolio. So here's this little thought exercise, and you can go through this. Let's go through it. If we were to try and classify each of the following as either a project, a program, a portfolio, or even as operational work, have a think about that as we go through this. So let's start at the beginning. Implementing a new software system in an organization. What do you think? Project, program, portfolio? It's going to be one of those, isn't it? It's not operational work. The interesting thing about this, the answer depends on how big that software system is. Certainly a lot of software systems you would treat as a project. More complex ones you may treat as a program. Like if they've got lots of modules being done like a big ERP system, you might go, this is a program of work because there's interdependencies between each of the modules and we're going to stagger their implementation. But generally, that would be project. Building a house, generally be considered a project. Even though there's sub-trades and different processes, there's design, there's consenting, there's different parts of the build from the foundation, the plumbers, the roofers, things like that, you generally consider that as a project. But it'd have to be a pretty big house over a big period of time for it to be considered a program. But building a new housing subdivision, generally that would be a program because it's generally over a considerable period of time, years. And there's such distinct interdependencies there between design, layout, consenting, earthworks, right through to individual site preparation, building. So generally, I would certainly argue that's more of a program. Others would say it was a project. I would go mainly program. So already with these first few, you see there's grey areas between project, program, and even portfolio. It's not hard and fast rules. Restructuring an organization, when a new CEO and they come in and they say, I'm here to listen. They all say that, by the way. And then after 90 days, they announce their plans for restructuring, where instead of 18 direct reports, there's going to be 7 direct reports. Or instead of 3, there's going to be 11, and all those redundancies. Jokingly, sometimes this seems like operational work for some companies, doesn't it? They always seem to be doing it. But again, the size and complexity of this particular initiative will dictate whether it is a project or a program. If it's a small restructure, project, large, program. Building a new piece of software for a client, generally going to be a project, like a new website, new app, that's a project. have to be pretty big to be considered a program again. So there's that size difference and complexity difference between project and program. What about me teaching a course in project management? I teach this a lot. I've been teaching since 2005, so it's been a long time. This slide has been around since 2005 in various different formats as well. So for me, what's teaching a course in project management? Every bunch of students I encounter is a unique bunch. It's unique, and it ends. So does that make it a project? Well, no, it's not. It's operational work. It's what I do for a living. I teach project management. So for me, there's nothing new in it. It's I've delivered this particular slide since 2005. Even though the students may be new and I may never see them again and the course has a beginning and an end, for me it's operational work. Exploring potential oil and gas drilling areas, once again, size and complexity here. For some organizations, it would be a project, one of the big multinationals. For other organizations, it would be a program because the results of this might lead on to decisions to drill beyond that. And for some smaller companies, it might be their entire portfolio. They may only have a license to explore one particular area, and that is their whole portfolio of work. Repairing aircraft here, it's got a beginning and an end and somewhat unique, but it's operational. When you take your car to a mechanic, they don't set up a project to repair your car. It's operational work, it's what they do. So repairing aircraft with that. And the last two, some movie analogies, which obviously at the time of recording this were current, and considering how long James Cameron takes to produce movies, they're probably still current, even when if you're watching this many years in the future. So producing the actual trilogy for Avatar, I'll go with program for this, I think. Really big, complex program. I don't think it's an entire portfolio. I mean, I don't know James Cameron's company and what else it was doing. If it was only doing the Avatar trilogy, you could argue it was an entire portfolio and each movie was a program within that and different elements of the movie were projects. But I would go probably a program. Yeah, again, size and complexity here. And one of his movies, in this case, Avatar, The Way of Water, apart from being too long by 40 minutes in the middle, being recorded, aren't I? Better watch what I say. Tempting to call it a project, but I think the complexity of it with all the different filming units and all the different, from live action to CGI to scripting to everything that has to come together, I think more tempting to treat it as a program. So the point of that was just to show you that there are some general rules that define project, program, portfolio, but different companies might have a different approach depending on size and complexity. And hopefully by the time you watch this, the next James Cameron movie has come out. So let's talk really quickly about what exactly then is a project manager. God, so I often say jokingly, please don't take offense by that. Project manager, well, the funny thing is we all understand what a general manager is of an organization, don't we? The general manager is in charge of the organization, responsibility for hiring and firing and strategy and finance and marketing and sales. Well, project manager is just that for a project. I've often said a project manager is just a general manager, but of a project. So it's very similar. And the Venn diagrams of the two, you know, for project manager, that'd be the Venn diagram, and for general manager, be like that. It'd be a huge amount of overlap. And as I said earlier on, the only difference would be the project manager is in charge of a business which is going out of business. The general manager is in charge of a business that wants to stay in business. It is a challenging profession, not going to lie. Diversity, challenge, and change are all part of the job. If that doesn't sit well with you, you probably won't be a great project manager. Change happens, challenge happens. You need to be comfortable with that. If you're not, maybe project management isn't for you. They should have equally high levels of authority and responsibility, and we'll talk about that very soon. They are responsible for the performance, success of the project, hence why they need the levels of responsibility and authority. They've got to be the ones who lead and choose to use the right people at the right time to deal with the right issues. But most of all, forget the Gantt charts, forget the risk registers, forget the earned value management. They've got to be fantastic communicators. They've got to be able to talk with a wide variety of people easily. They've got to be able to communicate effectively with presentations, with texts, with graphs, with emails. They've got to be able to have great meetings presentation skills. They've got to get on with all sorts of stakeholders. They've got to have great leadership skills. In fact, the research is really clear on this. The best project managers are those with the best, what we call soft skills or power skills. These are the ones that separate great from good project managers. So in your career as a project manager, find out how to do Gantt charts, find out how to do qualitative risk analysis, find out how to do earned value management, find out how to do, financial justification for investment in a project. But most of all, work on your communication, your stakeholder management, your people management, your team development, your personal leadership skills. This is what will separate you from the good project managers, and you're on your way to becoming a great project manager. So just a bit more about responsibility and authority. It is all about high levels of responsibility and authority. So my argument, my contention is that a project manager should have high levels of responsibility and high levels of authority. So if they've got all the responsibility for the success of the project, they should have high levels of delegated authority. And this means they should have the ability to consider change requests that come to them. They should be able to approve extra budget, or not extra budget, but budget within their contingency or time within their contingency, without having to keep going back to the project sponsor or the steering committee or the client, that they've got authority. They've also got the authority to get the people they need when they need them, rather than having to continually beg to the functional managers to get the staff they want. That's what high levels of responsibility and authority actually mean. Too many project managers, in my opinion, have high levels of responsibility, low levels of authority. That should never happen. You're going to be on a hiding to nothing. Or if you don't understand that little idiom, you're going to be set up for failure right at the beginning. So you want high levels of responsibility, high levels of authority. If you don't have that, the key thing is to make sure that whatever levels of responsibility and authority you have are matched. So if they're lower level, we can just come down this now, like this. So as you get down lower levels of responsibility and authority, you might be a project coordinator, might be a project administrator, or even a strange term called project expediter, which we don't really use that much. The most common terms are project manager, project coordinator, project administrator. Some people use these terms to denote junior or senior roles. They tell me about responsibility and authority straight away. So if you find yourself being given the role of project manager with lots of responsibility and low levels of authority, perhaps you should be saying, look, unless you're going to give me high levels of authority, I'm going to be a project coordinator or project administrator and make sure my authority and my responsibility levels are equal. So keep that one in mind. So here's a discussion. What do you think? Do you think a project manager should have the technical skills in the area in which they're working? So, should a software project manager have come from a software background? Should a construction manager have come from a civil engineering or structural engineering background? What do you think? There's certainly a lot of people out there that go, well, they should have. Otherwise, how will they know what they're doing? But the correct answer is, it doesn't matter. Their job is a professional project manager. They should have team members they trust. And if you're about to say, but what happens if they don't trust them? That's a different issue. You've got an issue with trust. So my background is I've managed projects in software, hardware, construction, urban redevelopment, housing, telecommunications networks, organizational restructure, ERP migrations, medical device. So I've managed lots of projects in lots and lots of different industries because I'm a professional project manager. My profession is project management. Drop me into a project, obviously at a certain level. If you're working on a really small project where you're supposed to be the technical expert, then that's different. You need to be both project manager and subject matter expert or technical expert. Generally, my argument is it's not really necessary, but obviously we have a lot of project managers entering the profession from a technical background. A lot of project managers enter the profession from a mechanical, civil, or structural engineering background, or they enter IT project management from a software or hardware engineering background too, in which case that's great. But then they need to be mindful that they need to leave behind that technical speciality and move on to project management as their career, because we also see too many technical specialists deciding to be project managers, managing projects, and they won't stop interfering with the technical specialists. So hopefully that clears that up for you. The answer is, yeah, they don't need to. So keep that in mind. And we certainly are seeing now a rise in people entering the profession of project management who just come out of university with a bachelor's degree or a master's degree or even a doctorate in project management and start in as the entry-level project manager there. So they don't have a technical background in engineering of any form, but they're straight out of project management. The next topic, project sponsorship and governance. Hopefully you're still paying attention. Bit of a long module, this one, isn't it? Hopefully though, you're finding it useful. So project sponsorship and governance. Let's talk about that. What is governance? A lot of people get confused about this. What is governance? Isn't it just more management? Isn't it just telling the project manager what to do? Well, no, it's not. Governance is there to provide oversight. It's supposed to be the wisdom at the top that's there to work with the project manager, but also keep the project manager accountable. They're not supposed to run the project. The project manager and the governance group, whether it's a project steering group, project control group, governance group, whatever you want to call it, there's lots of names for it, by the way. It's there at a higher level to ask the right questions of the project manager, to ask them about their reports, to see if they've got any issues, and to see if they can offer any wisdom. And the easiest way to think about it, if you know what like the board of a large multinational does, the board of a large multinational doesn't run the company. It runs the CEO and works with the CEO, but the CEO is responsible for running the company. Well, that's the same as governance groups or steering groups for projects as well. They're there to provide assistance, wisdom, accountability to the project manager. The project manager manages the project. So the project manager should have a really good relationship with the project sponsor and any members of the steering committee. So that's what they should have. A lot of times they don't. It's a shame. What is the project sponsor? Good question. The project sponsor, the easiest way to find the project sponsor is to find who authorized the project. Who authorized the organization committing time and money on this project? That's probably the project sponsor. Somebody senior within the organization that's got that level of authority, which means that the project manager can use them to remove obstacles and resolve issues by contacting them and saying, I've got some issues, can you help me out? Project sponsor sits on the steering committee or governance group, but the project manager should feel comfortable talking with them many times a day and being open and honest with them, and they know that that person can help them resolve issues and they can go to that person. So they should also, the project sponsor has the role of being the champion for the project, advocating for it, and that's what we want to see is project sponsors who are actively engaged. Unfortunately, the real world is there's a lot of project sponsors who don't know what sponsorship is. They become sponsored by default and they don't really know what their job is. They're either absent or trying to be managers. And we know that the absence of an engaged and experienced project sponsor is definitely a contributing factor to project failure there. So get your project sponsors some training if they're going to be project sponsor, and they should be working in partnership with the project manager and also with the steering committee as well. What are these steering groups exactly? Now, they have lots of names. Project steering group, project steering committee, project governance, governance groups, governance boards, board of directors even at certain levels. These are the people that combine all of those elements of governance. They're not there to manage the projects. They may be responsible for multiple projects and therefore their meetings have reports from multiple project managers. That's absolutely fine. The only people on steering groups should be people who can make decisions. Often we find steering groups are populated with really important stakeholders who just want to be kept informed, but their position on a steering committee is wasting their time and your time. Keep them informed, but the people on the steering groups and steering committees and governance groups should be people who can make decisions. So the project manager should be able to go to those committees or groups and say, I've got an issue or I need a decision. The people on that steering group should make the decisions. That's what they're there for. So, and don't let them get too big. 3 or 4, 5 tops. Keep hearing about steering groups and steering committees that are 8, 9, 10, 11. They're not steering groups, they're parties. So keep them small and efficient and populated with people who can make decisions. And remember, they don't run the project manager does. Let's talk about the PMO, just covering off some last of the foundational concepts. We're nearly finished, so pay attention. We're nearly getting to the end. What exactly is this mystical, magical thing called the PMO? PMO. Well, even the name is confusing, isn't it? PMO. What does the P stand for? Project, portfolio, performance, program. Would you cover that? Is it a project management office, program management office, portfolio management office, performance management office? Has it got an E in front of it? Is it an enterprise project management office? Is it a project support office? Some of the ones that I'm seeing now are investment management office or value. That should be an M. There's a spelling mistake there. Value management office or project delivery office. What exactly is it? Well, the hard thing about it is it's not one thing. Well, I'll just call it the PMO, but I could be talking about a PSOE, PMO, IMO, VMO, whatever. Essentially what it means is it's the center of excellence for project management, whatever that means, for the organization at this time. There are lots of things a PMO can do, but the research tells us that organizations with a PMO of any sort, generally speaking, do better than organizations without. So generally, we do want you to have some form of PMO that suits your current and immediate future needs. So the PMO should be supporting your current project management needs, but also planning for your needs in the next 2 years. So it may be growing, it may be gathering more roles and responsibilities or additional staff, as long as they're in support of what your project management opportunities are. So there are lots of things a PMO can do. Let's talk about some of them. The things that it does choose to do define whether it is a PMO or a PSO or delivery office. I certainly work with some clients that will have a project delivery office. Each business unit will have a project management office, and then there'll be an enterprise management office or enterprise PMO at the top. And I know of one client that's got an ePMO, an investment management office, and then each business unit has its own PMO. I don't know, it starts to get a little bit confusing, but it works for that organization. So these are the general types of PMO that you might have. At the bottom level, you might have very supportive PMO. This is one that's just there to help the project managers out. It might have some tools and templates, might do auditing or health checks or training on request, and it's just there to support the project managers. And typically we would see this called a project support office. It's the best term for that. I helped a client put one in just 2 years ago, and they really wanted to call it a PMO. And I said, look, the name that you choose has to communicate to people exactly what it is, and got them to agree that right now for the first 2 years it was best to call it a PSO, with the plans that as it grew in capability and responsibility, it would then at some point become a PMO to communicate to people. You can move on to controlling. This is where it may choose to actually take responsibility for delivering the projects or choosing the projects or doing the standardized reporting or portfolio management. So it begins to control different aspects of it. It might define the methodology and make sure you're using it and updating it. And then finally, a directive type of PMO is everything that's need to be. And I've certainly had a friend of mine who ran a very directive PMO in a very large multinational. If it was a project in that organization, it came through her. Her PMO, which was simply called a PMO, by the way, nothing flash, wasn't even called an ePMO, it was just called a PMO, billion-dollar organization. They were responsible for considering all potential projects, choosing them, prioritizing them, financing them, recruiting the project managers, training the project managers, assigning the project managers, standardized project reporting, obviously all the project training, the methodologies, plural, their development and application, the project health checks, the assurance, all of those things. Very directive PMO if it was a project that went through her office. So somewhere in there is your type of PMO. It's funny, at the time of writing, at the time of recording this, I'm working with a client to develop a PMO. And one of the first steps we're doing is to try and figure out what sort of PMO they actually need. So that's the first thing we're doing for the first 6 weeks, is just figuring out what sort of PMO do you need? What have you already got? What processes in that do you already have? And then at the end of that, we'll have a really good picture, and I'll make a recommendation for the type of PMO they need now. I imagine that what I'll end up doing is making a recommendation for the type of PMO they need for the next 2 years. But then beyond that 2 years, I'll probably indicate where it should probably morph into or what it should change into. So yeah, PMO should change to suit the organizations. If the organization's changing, so should the PMO. These are some of the different functions that a PMO can do. I've mentioned them already. Project reporting, portfolio management, financing or risk at a portfolio level, project selection and prioritization, recruitment of project managers, and that includes internal and external, assignment of project managers, project management training, program management, development and administering the methodology, audits, assurance, health checks. you choose what your PMO should do now, but don't go overboard with your first PMO, because treat PMOs as a change management initiative, because there'll always be difficulties with putting them in place. So do keep that in mind. Also make sure that if you've got a PMO that you sing out really loud what you actually do and what value, because we find that PMOs are often political footballs, and when finances get tough or anything like that, the first thing as a CEO says, get rid of the PMO, which is the worst thing they can do. So make sure if you do have a PMO, you let everybody know what you do. Now, this slide's a bit tongue-in-cheek, because I've had clients that have wanted a PMO and those practitioners have said, yeah, we want a PMO, and they can't seem to convince senior management, because senior management goes, we don't need a PMO. So I've certainly done this before, is to set up what I call a PMO by stealth. That's what the little spy here is supposed to be. A community of practice. Basically, it's proving value sneakily, in a sneaky manner. And the example I give is an organization I worked with a few years ago. Management said, no, we're not having a PMO. A waste of time, waste of money. So we set up a community of practice. And once a month, the last Friday of every month, all the project managers, about 70 in the organization, would choose a topic. They'd get together at 4 o'clock on a Friday. They'd have an external or internal speaker about the particular topic. They'd talk about that. They'd ask other questions. They'd take notes. They'd make some decisions on what to improve about their processes as a result of what they learned. And they kept telling management that this is a great community of practice, is what we're learning. And over the course of 12 months, they actually did make some great changes and improve things, such that at the end of it, management said, well, why don't you turn that into a PMO? So that's a great way to do it by stealth if your organization is adverse to the idea of a PMO. So keep in mind, just a final discussion here. Do you think you need program managers? Do you think you need a portfolio manager? Do you understand the differences between them? Based on that, do you think you need a PMO? If you have a PMO, is it the right sort of PMO that you have now? What should it be in a year's time or 2 years' time? Should it be bigger or smaller? Should it be doing more or less? Do you need to call it a PMO, a PSO, a PDO, that's Project Delivery Office, or Enterprise PMO? Think about all those sorts of different questions now that we've been over those different topics. Let's go over some of the causes of project success and project failure. Very simple ones here. The sad statistic is that globally, we often see these reports come out like from Standish Group or PwC or some other big name consultancy wanting to scare us, that 60 to 70% of projects fail. The number has stayed the same for the last 20 years that I've been seeing these reports. Sounds terrible, doesn't it? But it's actually not that terrible. If you take a look at what it generally says, is half of that number is genuine failures, like blew their budgets, unhappy clients, didn't deliver anything. But the other half are often judged failures, that what they delivered and what was documented didn't match. So they're sort of like technical failures. Look, regardless, it's still a high number of project fail, and every project failure, and every time we have a failed project, there's wasted money, there's jobs lost, there's missed opportunities. So we don't want failure, whatever the number are. But I know that there are organisations, and I've certainly worked with organisations that expect over 90 or even 95% project success. So project success isn't that hard to come with, and it all depends on project maturity and practitioner competency, as we'll see shortly. So when it comes to successful projects, I show this diagram to clients to stress something, because a lot of people think that to obtain successful 3PM, now 3PM just means 3 Ps, portfolio, program, and project, 3P. 3PM is portfolio, program, and project management. That's what that is. To be successful at portfolio, program, and project management, what you should do is have the right tools, the right software. You should have Project Server or Primavera or Sentient or whatever else you're using, Procore or Trello or Jira. Tools, that's what gives you. And I always say to clients, no, that's not the case. Also, that's fine. We'll just put more processes and practice in place. We'll put some audit process in place. We'll put some risk management process and project selection process, and we'll train people up. No. I used to say this was the bottom level, competent project managers, because that is basically the best place to focus, how competent your people are. I've recently been, because of organizations I've seen organizations that have competent project managers and C-level, which is fighting. And so I started putting this in a few years ago to demonstrate to organizations that actually the foundational element of successful portfolio program and project management is organization-wide support for project management. That's it, from C-level to COO to CFO, whatever else. And we should even have a CPO in there, Chief Project Officer, just to demonstrate that. And then it's competent project managers, and then above that, processes, tools. And the best way to demonstrate this, if you think tools, process, and practice is what you need, not competency, consider that you lead a crew of people building houses. They're not doing a great job of building houses. And you think, well, the solution is I just go down to the local hardware store and I buy them all the latest and best tools. I buy them the best saws and spirit levels and drills and all those things, and I give them to them. What you've probably just done is created a health and safety hazard. You've given really sharp tools and expensive tools to people who aren't competent. They'll probably injure themselves and continue doing more damage. Whereas if you go and get your project practitioners, project managers, coordinators, program managers, some training and increase their level of competency, my contention is that you can actually give them second-hand tools, and they'll learn how to fix those tools, they'll learn how to use those tools appropriately, and they'll do them a lot better. So always start here, but please make sure you've got organization-wide support for your project, for project management. Here are just basic 9 tips. This is taken from research. Is one of the sort of main factors. And it's also these 2 slides. Many years ago, a client challenged me just to sort of present in 15 minutes the reasons for successful projects. So these 2 slides are a hangover from that challenge that I think I accepted foolishly because they got the wrong idea. But anyway, so first one is, I've already said, have high levels of project management capability or competency. That's where it starts. Only choose the right projects for the right reasons. And the first reason should be they align with your corporate strategy. Have some sort of PMO. That organizations with them do better than without. Get your sponsors some training so they provide effective, engaged sponsorship and work with the project manager. As I said before, lack of an engaged sponsor is a reason for project failure. Choose the right projects with robust business cases where you've considered all the potential outcomes and benefits, you've considered the costs, and you've given it proper thought. Always and actively manage risk throughout the entire project life cycle. As you'll see once you do the risk management module, it's not just a one-off thing that you do, pat yourself on the back and forget about. Risk management is continual and ongoing. Accurate, honest, and up-to-date information that makes up your regular reporting. Always be transparent. Track, report, and document changes and variations, every single one of them. So hopefully you'll be watching the change control module at some point and see my emphasis on that. And have an appropriate and tailored project management methodology that suits you, your organization, your complexity, your duration. Just don't get one off the shelf and expect it to work. Hopefully you've watched you will watch the How to Build a Project Management Methodology, one which covers all of those things. So you do those things, you've got a greater chance of project success. Can you guarantee project success? No, because there's uncertainty in projects. You can do all of these things perfectly and still have projects fail. Very small chance of that happening though. So keep that in mind. We can never guarantee project success, but we can look to increase the chance of project success with the right appropriate project management practices. So here we are. We've come to the end of this module. Well done on paying attention. I appreciate your attention, so thank you very much. As a last quiz to see if you've been paying attention, just match up the words on the left with the definitions on the right. Let's see how you go. I'll reveal them as we go along. So let's see. What do you think a project manager is? Is it A, B, C, or D? Hopefully you chose D, the person delivering the project with high levels of delegated authority and responsibility. So what's a project coordinator then? Well, hopefully you chose B, the person with medium levels of delegated authority and responsibility. What's a PMO? You've only got a choice between A, C, and E now. So of those, hopefully you chose C. It's the center of excellence, whatever that means, in project management for the organization. And then the last two, rolling wave planning and what is a project? Well, you've only got A and E to choose from, and it's obvious from that the rolling wave planning is E and a project is A. So hopefully you got those right. Thanks for paying attention. I do appreciate it. So look, just recapping, started off by saying at the end of this, I wanted to check in that we've covered some foundational concepts in project management. I've introduced you to the profession. So hopefully now you know that there is a growing and maturing profession in project management. All those ISO standards, PMBOK guide, PMI, all the credentials and certifications. You're now aware there's defined roles, project manager, program manager, portfolio manager, all of that, and functions within the profession. And hopefully I've managed to stress for you throughout this that what is right for you and your projects will depend on the level of maturity of the organization, complexity of the projects, competency of the practitioners, duration, all of those things. But at the end of the day, even though you can't guarantee project success, you can improve project success rates. Thanks very much for paying attention. As always, if you've got any questions at all, if anything's not clear, drop me a quick email and I'll make sure I get back to you and make sure I answer any of your questions. But thanks for all of that, and yeah, have a fantastic rest of the day. Thanks.